All right, welcome back, everybody, to the 10th week of Tech Bytes, the Python programming session. We have come a long way, the 2.5 month way mark. And if you are new coming in from the Intro to Programming course, which we recently started, welcome to the second week. But if you're coming back from way back in the start of June, the start of summer vacation, which are now ending, you are here for the 10th week. And we got a lot in store today. We're going to be reviewing our awesome concepts and applying them finally and making some cool projects. So without any further ado, let's get started. In case you don't already know me, my name is Rayan Siddiqui. I am a senior now at James B. Conant High School. I love to program. I've made multiple apps for the App Store, made a dozen different websites, and I'm now making content on YouTube channels, starting my own talk show, and writing articles as well. If you want to find out more about me, my website at rayansiddiqui.com. All right. And I also noted that there are some people who have not joined the Google Classroom. So if you think you have not joined, it's super simple. All you need is a Google account. So if you don't have one yourself, feel free to use your parents and just notify me that, hey, this is my parents' name, but I'm actually using this account. And the code is listed there. I will drop in the chat again. And you might ask, why should I join the classroom? Well, the classroom is very essential because at the end of every day, that is where I not only post a link to our recorded session if you want to go back and check out old concepts, but also it's where I publish the links to the code, which we're writing every day. So say you have a mishap, your computer crashes, you mess up a line, and you're like, how can I fix that? Well, there's always a fresh copy of mine, which is always completed on the Google Classroom. And if not, there's a link. There's always some pictures to supplement the material. And you can find a daily recap with what we went over in case you ever miss a session or whatever the case might be. So if you not already joined, be sure to do such. All right, so let's get down to today's agenda. Remember last week in the web development course, we started a new tradition, that being the daily fun fact. And I did say that we're going to be implementing it in our Intro to Programming course as well. So today we're going to get started off with a new tradition in this course called the Daily Fun Fact. And it's going to be a fun fact relating our programming language, which we're studying, that being in this case Python, to a real world example or something just cool. So if you remember from last week, we talked about how JavaScript was used to power the spaceship, which sent the two SpaceX astronauts, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, to the International Space Station. Well, today we'll have another fun fact with Python. And then we're going to recap all of our concepts, make sure that all of the webs in our brain, any misconceptions, everything is sorted out so that we can start a project now called Rock, Paper, Scissors, which you have probably played a lot of times with your friends, but we're now actually going to be playing against a computer, and we'll get right to it. So today's cool Python fun fact of the day. Now, Python is an open source coding language. Now you might be asking, what does that even mean? Well, open source, you might be asking what that means. So what open source essentially means is that open source code is where people like you and I, we can contribute to the projects. Now, how does that correlate to Python? Well, Python is a programming language which was developed by people like us, people who like to code and make our own programs. You see, Python was made in the mid-1980s, and it's a language which was essentially coded by people, and now we can actually use the programming language to make our own projects. And the awesome thing about Python is that it is open source. So I can say I want to sometimes just make my own library. Remember those import statements which we often use, like import math to do random number calculations? Well, I could make my own library. I could contribute my own ideas to the actual programming language. So more in depth, open source means that we can actually change the code, and then we can submit our changes or modifications or even additions we might have. And then somebody in the team who works for the Python programming language now, I believe it's a whole corporation or something of that sort, they can then merge our code into the original project. Now, you might ask, where and how do I do such? Well, have you heard of the version control system called GitHub? I believe I have the tab open. If I open it right here, here we go. If you go on to GitHub, and GitHub, guys, you don't need to know this, especially at this stage right now, but essentially, if you've ever worked with Google Drive, the place where you can share folders, create Google Documents, Google Slides, whatever, all the Google Suite products, there's GitHub is essentially a Google Drive, made for coders like you and I. Now, you might ask, Google Drive for coders? Well, it's basically a place where we can hold our code. So it's much nicer than Google Drive and being able to add your code, remove code, being able to share with others. Essentially, GitHub is made for programmers so that they can commit their code so that others can see. And what you might see on my screen pulled up right now is the Python repository, which is essentially where all the code for the Python programming language is being held. So if I hover over the word Python, we can see that repositories related to the Python programming language. So all of these files and the hundreds of thousands of files within all these folders, the subfolders, they all are related to the Python programming language. And if I wanted to, I could even commit, and you could do this as well. If you felt like you had a new idea, maybe a new library, maybe a new addition which could really help the language, you could simply make something which is called a pull request, and that is how you can change or edit, remove, whatever you want to do with the language, the code, and then you submit the code, and then somebody in the team, in the Python team, they can open up the request, look at what you made, what changes you made, and then if they like it and they approve it, your code can be merged or essentially integrated into the actual language. Now, that's pretty cool because that means that people like all of us, teenagers, regardless of whatever your age, you can make an impact in helping contribute to a language like Python. So that was the fun fact for today, something pretty cool considering how we can make an impact on a language so near and dear to us, which we have been learning for the past 2.5 months. So if you have any questions, want to learn more about what is open source or GitHub, definitely post on the Google Classroom. I'll even link it in our classroom today, or drop a comment in the chat. All right, so let's get back on our Python course and let's recap all of the concepts which we have been learning for the past 2.5 months. Truly crazy how time flies, guys, but believe it or not, we have covered all of these topics from variables, functions, loops, whether they be for loops or while loops, logic statements, if else ifs, all these different types of logic statements, booleans, true and falses, global, local variables, parameters, and a whole bunch of other stuff we have covered in the past 2.5 months. If you remember, we started little by creating a foundation with the block coding, and we worked our way up to learning all of those concepts and how to type them out in actual code. And I must say that we have done an awesome job in the past 2.5 months. We have covered truly a lot of content, and now it's time that we start getting back on the projects. When we started about a month away in, we were getting on a lot of projects, making games like the higher lower game, making the quiz games, which we even shared with one another. Well, now it's time to get back on those projects, start expanding the scope of the projects, because we are obviously much more equipped now with much more skills in our backpack. So today we're going to be making rock, paper, scissors. Now, here are the core concepts, or the main idea which I want to focus on today, and what concepts which we will be really using and hitting home on with this rock, paper, scissors game. So here is the main ideas. One, we want to store the user input into a variable. Remember, since we're probably going to be asking the user to make a choice between rock, paper, or scissors, we're probably going to want it to convert to a string. Now, if you need a quick refresher on the screen, here we go. Remember, there are two types which we have often talked about, that being numbers, and then one being strings. Now, numbers are your every numbers. It could be 5, 10.2, all these different types of numbers, whole numbers, integers, all that good stuff. But then strings are words. Remember, we put them in quotation marks. Well, that is where we will be storing our user's input into a string variable. We will use a loop, most likely a while loop, or we can even use a for loop if you want to get fancy, in order to ask the user for an input. So, hey, do you want to rock, paper, scissors multiple times, or however many times we want to run the game? Then we will use booleans. Remember all that true and false, the De Morgan's law. In case you might be confused as to what am I talking about, De Morgan's law, booleans. Well, if you can check out our YouTube channel, the Schaumburg Library, and learn all about booleans in last week's Python video. So if you just go over there, it should be Intro to Programming Week 1, the video should be titled. And then lastly, we will be using parameters. Remember what we learned about how we can use pass-in values into our functions, which at the end of the day allow us to really abstract our code and clean it up so that we can reuse our code, and all in all, just makes our project much nicer. So without any further ado, guys, let's load up our coding website. Now, you might be opening our old website, which we've been using for the past month while transitioning to typing code. Today, we are going to be using a new, and in my opinion, it's a better and more improved website for actually coding in Python. The old website, you might be asking, why aren't we just using that? Well, it's not that nice in actually asking the user for input, and considering how in rock, paper, scissors, you got to know the input of the user. And this online environment really allows us to do that much nicer. So I will drop this website in the chat if you do not want to type it out. Totally understand. And there you go. It should be in the chat. So how about we open that up, guys, and then we'll get started. So if you could please let me know once you are on the website, and we'll get started shortly. Yep, so if everybody could please just notify in the chat that they are on the new Python coding website, we'll get started. Awesome. All right, we'll get started in a couple more seconds. Just make sure everybody's good. All right, so you may or may not remember that whenever we're doing our web development course, we use a website called JS Fiddle. Now, similarly, like I say on JS Fiddle, I would highly recommend that you make an account with this new website called Replit. You might ask, why should I make an account? Well, it's really useful because when I link the code in our Google Classroom, you can easily access it without having the notification to make an account. And also, it's very nice in being able to save your code. So say you have a question, you want to shoot me an email, make a post in the classroom, you can directly link your code in the classroom, and then I can pull it up on your account and see what any errors might be. All in all, just a nice way to save your code and be able to show maybe your parents, your siblings, whatever the case might be, that, hey, this is something cool I made, go check it out. So I would definitely recommend that you make an account so you can save the code. All right, so let's get started today by coding our rock, paper, scissors game. Now, I don't think I gotta say this, but in case you are not familiar with the rock, paper, scissors game, basically how it goes is that if you've not played with a friend, you do rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Well, you usually have three options which you can choose, that being rock, paper, or scissors. What a surprise, right? Well, you choose one of those options, and then your friend, or in this case, we're playing against a computer who's gonna make a decision. Computer is going to make a choice. So say I choose rock and the computer chooses paper. Now paper beats rock, which is why the computer will win. So how about I just type out the cases in case you are not familiar with the rock, paper, scissors game, which I doubt, but still, we always have. Just make sure everybody is on the same page. So say rock beats paper, no, rock beats scissors. Scissors beats paper. Paper beats rock. And am I missing any? Yes. So rock. Oh, I think we're good. Yeah. Okay. So this is the main. These are the main three which we have to look out for. There are different combinations which we can put. So this is the main idea. If you've never played, you and the other person, they choose one item each, rock, paper, scissors, and then you evaluate what happens. But today we're going to be playing against a computer, making it much more cooler and much more nice to program as well. We will evaluate who actually won using some logic if-else statements. And then we're going to keep one large while loop so that we can run our game multiple times on however many times we want to run it. So without any further ado, guys, here we go. All right, And FYI, guys, if you don't need to type this out, this is just I was doing this to visualize so that people could see. And since I put this hashtag symbol, this code will not be executed because the computer is treating this as being commented out. So let's get started. One library which we will be using today is called random. We've used this often with block coding, not so much with our typing code examples, but all you gotta do is to import. And you might notice one of the cool things about this website is that it autofills for us. So import random. All right, so now we got that. All right, so now we have to actually ask the user to make an input. Now, you might remember we did a lot of input-based games like the quiz game and all those good games we did in the past where we asked the user for an input, and it's pretty simple. How do we do that? Well, before we actually type out the input statement where we want the user, how about we actually hold our code inside of a function? So how about we create a function? I'm going to call it initiate game, just a nice name like such. And then remember the colon indentation. And then just to make sure that our function is running, I'm just going to print this function has ran. And then I'm going to run the actual function. And if I hit run, oh, I forgot the open and close parentheses. There we go. So this function is working smoothly. So we have made our function. Let's type the actual code to hold all of our ideas. So firstly, we want to tell the user, hey, make a choice. So how about to make this game actually nice, because it is a text-based game, how about we create a print statement and just say, hi, please make a choice of, and then we can just do either rock, paper, or scissors. Just telling the user, hey, make a choice. And if I run it, we should see that statement being printed out like such. Now, we actually got to prompt the user to input a value of either rock, paper, or scissors. So how do we do that? Well, like such. So we're going to have to hold the value of the user's input in a variable. We'll just call it user choice. Nice, simple like that. And set it equal to an input. So how do we do that? Well, you simply just type out input. And then open and close parentheses, like such. And then we'll type out, say, enter your choice with a colon to make it look nice. There we go. Now, you might remember that we have to convert this to a string just in case. So how can we do that? We simply just do str, short for string, open parenthesis, and then add one more close parenthesis to make sure it's all nice and closed. Give you guys a quick minute to catch up there. Let me know, as always, if you have any questions while they're going through. If I'm ever going too fast, always let me know. Ready to slow down and answer any questions. All right, so now that we are actually able to get some input from the user, how about we just run our code to make sure that actually works? So I'm just going to print the user choice variable to make sure that we did our input statement correctly. So if I hit run, we get outputted that please make a choice. So I'll put rock, and we should see the word rock being printed out. And voila, we do see the word rock being printed out. So that's perfect, meaning that we have accomplished the first stage of our project, that being grabbing the user input. So now we have to somehow get the computer's input. Now, how can we get the computer to make a random choice? Well, how about we do something like this? We have the 3 values which the computer can choose held in an array. How can we do that? Well, remember, we talked a whole bunch about arrays and lists and the awesome functions which we can do with them, like adding elements, removing elements, explaining the indexes. Well, how about we create an array called possible choices? We'll call it that. We'll set it equal to, remember, this bracket type. And then we need 3 options, which are, in this case, remember, they are rock. And then we do comma, next option, paper, end quote, comma, begin quote, last option, that being scissors. There we go. All right, so now we have the 3 possible values which the computer can choose, and that will be the value which we're comparing against when playing our game. But how do we have an array, right? But how do we actually choose one of these 3 values? Well, coding is awesome, my friends, and one of the awesome ways which Python allows us to do and actually get the computer's choice is using something from this random import. So how about we hold the value of the computer's input, the computer's choice essentially, in a variable. We'll call it computer choice, like such. And we're going to set it equal to, follow my words here. It might get a bit long, but it's a random dot choice, open and close parentheses. And then we just add the name of our array. Now, this line of code is awesome, guys, because it essentially allows us to, what this line of code is doing is that it makes a random choice in our array. So it's going to choose rock, paper, or scissors, and then whichever element is chosen on a 33% probability, one of those values will be the value we're playing up against. So you might say, how do we know that's working? Let's do a quick test and actually print out the computer's choice, just to make sure that one of these 3 values is actually being chosen. And I'll hit run. So enter a choice. I'm going to do just put any random value. Oh, how about for 1 second, I will make this a bit more nicer to read. So I'll say computer's choice is. Now if I run this, just put anything for choice, and then we see that the computer chose paper. If I run this again, put anything again, computer chose paper again, anything, paper again, scissors. So now we can see that the computer can truly choose any one of these 3 values in this array, that being rock, paper, or scissors. All right, so now we got our value, the input of our rock, paper, scissors, and the computer's choice. But now we actually got to do the evaluating of who won the round. So I could do all the evaluation code in this one long function. But remember, I'm always hammering home the point that abstraction, making our code look nicer, is really important, something which you'll learn about as you take more computer programming classes, and something I believe is a good idea to start off with. Always minimizing the amount of code you got to write to perform an operation. So how about we make a new function, and we'll call it def evaluate round, like that. And then I'm going to pass in 2 parameters, that being my choice and the computer's choice. So I'm going to say user C, user choice, and then comp C, computer choice. Now, how about we actually call this function evaluate round within our initiate game function? So if I just go right here, indent properly, evaluate round, and then I'll pass in the user choice variable and then the computer choice variable. Now, guys, remember, I like to do a quick annotation here. This user choice variable is going to correspond with the user C variable because it's being passed in as a parameter, and this computer choice variable will be passed in as a comp C variable. Just different names, but at the end of the day, it's making our code cleaner. Give you guys a quick minute to catch up. Alrighty, so let's start evaluating. Now, can anybody have a guess? Does anybody have a guess? What concept are we going to use from, if I go back to the slides, from this list to actually do the evaluation of who won the round? Anybody in the chat have an idea? Are we going to be using loops, logic statements, or booleans? What do you think? Alrighty, and the correct answer is you'll be using logic statements, aka if-else statements, to see who won the round. So let's get started. Our first case, which we're going to look for, is what if I choose rock and the computer chooses rock? Well, we got to look for a tie. So how about we do if the user choice, remember we're using user C because that's the parameter, that's the accessible value we have. If user C equals computer choice. Oh, looks like it's reconnecting. 1 second. Looks like my internet is having a quick problem. Give me 1 second, guys. Let me fix this out. There we go. All right. Well, that was weird. Good thing I copied all of my code. Take a quick sip of water. All right. So we're back. So we were checking for if our value is the same as the computer value. In that case, we have like such. We'll just print out nobody won the round. It was a tie. Now, we're not always going to be having a tie, right? Because usually one person is going to win, either the computer or the user. How do we check for that? Well, we can use another, remember, the else if. So if this condition is not met, we're going to use an elif. So we'll do elif, standing for else if. We'll do if the user choice equals rock. We'll go in here like this, inside of this else if statement. And one quick thing, guys, before I forget. So you might notice that when I run this program, we're able to input we get an error. 1 second. One quick second, guys.